So everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you are a first-time listener, please subscribe. Definitely share this interview. We have a returning guest, one of my favorites, Andrew Bernstein. He has a lot of books out, but we're going to be talking about the book that he's got out right now, Why Johnny Still Can't Read or Write or Understand Math and What We Can Do About It. He's showing it on the screen right now. Andrew Bernstein, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. And please go out and get this book.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
All right, there's a lot of stuff going on in education. We're going to talk about the book first, but COVID really screwed up education-wise. A lot of these districts, states in general that locked down having horrific scores as far as the education scores. But a lot of these states that didn't lock down as long, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, the list goes on, they have better scores. What is your opinion on that? And, what are you hearing from parents, from people around the state of New York, around the country that are talking about their kids as far as, their education scores? I think we're in some deep trouble.
Yeah, and we have been for many years, long before the pandemic. And the parents are properly outraged that the kids were locked out of school for so long. Especially at the younger grades where the kids, the fundamental levels of education in first, second, third grade and so on, and those kids really got COVID, from my understanding. But I don't think we should lose sight of the deeper story here, Rob. And then COVID lockdown certainly hurt the education, but it was in the toilet even before that. You look at the NAEP scores, what they call the nation's report card, in 2019, the year before the pandemic, and they were just as bad or worse from the 2017 scores. And the only ones who improved were, I think it was the fourth graders in math by 1 point, an average of 240 out of 500 to 241 out of 500. Now, I was never the world's greatest math student, Rob, and going to the government schools K through 12 didn't help that. But 240 out of 500, even I realized that's 48%. That's a dismally failing score. And that was before the pandemic. So, we've been in trouble in the school system for a long time.
They're pushing these kids to the next grade, to the next grade, to the next grade, because they want their schools to get more of that funding from the state, from the federal government. And that's why these kids are coming out where they really shouldn't be passing to the next grade. They should be failing that grade and staying back, but they're passing them just so they can keep those numbers up. And those numbers are really not correct.
No, you're absolutely right. Social promotion is a real problem. The kids get graduated to the next, get promoted to the next grade level just on age. They get promoted to fourth grade regardless if they've mastered third grade material or even come close to it. So social promotion is a problem, but it goes even deeper than that. Today, the school system is so completely, it's not a secret, everybody knows this, it's so completely dominated by hardcore leftists that the goal of the school system today is to propagandize, indoctrinate kids with leftist propaganda, not to teach them academic subjects. So, there's any number of genders, maybe dozens of genders. You could choose any gender you want, and the insanity of telling 5 and 6 and 7-year-old children to choose what gender they want to be. This is child abuse, and it certainly isn't education. And drumming into their heads the dangers of pernicious human-caused warming. The science is settled, which it most certainly is not, by the way. Socialism is superior to capitalism. America is evil. The propaganda is much more important to the school system today than is academic education. And 100 years ago, it was the start of all of this in a similar vein. And that is, back then, that's when IQ tests first came in, Rob. And I go through the history in the book, Why Johnny Still Can't Read or Write or Understand Math. And the second half of the book, What We Could Do About It, shows parents what they could do about it to improve the kids' education. But IQ tests had just come in 100 years ago. They IQ tested the kids, look for the best, look for the brightest, and they get the full, they track the kids and get the full academic training, because the thinking was they'll go on to college. They'll be society's future leaders. They'll govern in the classroom and in the legislature. And the rest of us, the overwhelming majority of the kids, we don't need that much academic training. We don't need much math or history or science or literature, just like, a bare minimum of that. And we need practical skills, hygiene, driver's ed, sex ed, things like that, vocational training, wood shop, metal shop in the rural areas, agriculture. And the goal back then was to train the kids so that one, we'd be good at our vocation, we'd be good at our jobs, and two, we would obey the wise rulers of the state. That was the goal then. Today, it's a little bit different. Today, it's not so much about practical skills or vocational training. It's about propaganda. It's about leftist propaganda rather than academic training. But the ultimate goal is the same. Most of us don't need to be critical thinkers. We don't need that much thinking skills, reading, writing, arithmetic. We don't need that much content in history or science. We need to obey, the wise rulers of the socialist state that they're pushing politically. That's the shabby secret of the government school system. The reason American kids score so poorly on academic tests worldwide compared to kids from other countries is that in many European and Asian countries, Rob, they teach academic subjects much more widely and much more deeply than they do in America.
Are you worried about all this woke ideology in the school and how it's really hurting America? We don't see this in China. We don't see this in Russia. And we know what's happening in those countries right now. They're really taking control of us. And in my mind, and people might disagree with this, and I'll shut up and let you talk, is that Russia and China are basically kicking our ass right now, and they're taking control, and we got our hands between our legs like a bunch of little sissies.
I like the way you put it, Rob. Sorry. There are also a couple of brutal totalitarian states, so we don't want to don't want to emulate that. But yeah, I get your point. Just let me about politics. Just let me lay my cards on the table before I discuss wokeness, because I'm an Ayn Rand libertarian, and I recommend everybody to read her novels, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. I think they're great books. So I'm a strong supporter of individual rights. Support the right to abortion, support the right to gay marriage. Individuals who are consenting adults, it's none of my business who they have sex with. It's none of society's business. It's certainly none of the government's business. So, as an individualist and a supporter of individual rights, I certainly support gay marriage and gay sex for consenting adults, just like for heterosexual adults. But yeah, the woke ideology. I mean, first of all, what does it even mean? Woke or awake to what? And what the claim is, and these are hardcore leftists. What the claim is, that what they're woke to is, one, America is a systemically racist nation. Two, it's oppressive. It's oppressive not only against non-whites, but against women and gays and so on. And therefore, we need to push. There's this. You can see Marx's influence here, Rob. Marx defines society as this ongoing struggle between the oppressor and the oppressed class. But he defined the oppressor and the oppressed class narrowly in terms of in economic class issues, the rich oppress the poor. Well, the woke mentality today is postmodernist. The postmoderns, Foucault, Derrida, people like that, are Marxists who brought in that theory of social oppression. It's not just the rich that oppress the poor, according to the most postmodernists. It's males oppress females, straights oppress gays, whites oppress non-whites, so on. And we have to side with the oppressed in the struggle. And so we got to get up in your face about gayness and the oppression of gays and the oppression of non-whites, and talk about white privilege and convince the kids, and it's really evil, Rob. Convince all the white kids that they're guilty of white privilege.
This happened. Slavery happened years upon years ago, and we're talking about kids that have no bearings on what their great grandparents or great grandparents done. They don't, they may not even their judgment. Their great grandparents may not have even been in this country. But the bitter irony here is the woke mentality are Marxists, and they support communism. Now, communism
support slavery to this day. In China and North Korea, there's massive amounts of slave labor. So you get the bitter irony of people who support a system that promotes slavery to this day, criticizing America for the slavery it repealed more than 150 years ago. But since they don't teach the kids history, the kids that irony is just goes over.
But this
their
again
head.
goes back to the dumbing down of society when these kids are uneducated of what is really going on in the country, and they're just listening to these professors or these teachers that are just saying these things, and they just regurgitate these opinions that were made for them by other people to set their own agenda.
Right, part of the woke mentality. And you mentioned before, critical race theory is a big part of it. There's two elements to critical race theory. They hide behind the fig leaf of claiming we just want to teach the history of the United States, that is about slavery. Nobody's opposed to actually, what am I saying? The parents certainly aren't opposed to teaching of history, including the horrors of human slavery. No, that's a fig leaf. That's a cover-up. There's two elements to critical race theory. One is that America is still systemically racist today in 2022, like it was 100 years ago in 1922, when the Klan was millions of members of the Klan, and they were violent terrorists, thugs who murdered innocent Black Americans, often. America is still systemically racist is the first part of the critical race theory. And the second part's even worse. White people are inherently, inveterately racist. Built into our structure, and into our DNA, I suppose, is we are racist. And the school's job is to slap it out of these little kids, you little racist bastard, and to make them feel guilty about being white.
I mean, are the white people that are married to Black people, are they still racist? I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's a little out of control. Even when I was teaching in the schools, if you kicked the girl or the boy out of the school, they'd say you're a racist. This is going back 2015, 2016, not that long ago. And that's what they were saying. And it's a joke. So everybody's racist. So the people that really are racist, and there are those people out there for sure, the people that really are racist, it doesn't mean anything because you're calling everybody a racist.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's
a good
joke.
point. That's a good point, Rob. What was that dude's name in Charleston? Dylan Roof. Dylan Roof, yeah. He was a white supremacist, went to 2015, maybe went into a Black church in Charleston, South Carolina, shot it up, murdered like 9 innocent people. He's a white supremacist. He's a racist. And he's a murderer on top of that. But you're right. If me, what I do is write books and teach classes, and have a number of Black students that I work with, just like I work with the white kids or the Latino kids or the Asian kids. If I'm a racist, I'm no different than Dylan Roof and all of us white people like that. You're right. At that point, you've so diluted the concept of what it means to be a racist that we need to be truthful here. Dylan Roof and his ilk, white supremacists who are violent terrorists, they're still around. The Klan's still around. The Aryan Brotherhood still around. But in fairness to America, we've come a long way on this issue. You want to know the stats that I was able to find? And it's come from leftist organizations, so I take them with a grain of salt. But nevertheless, this is what I was able to find. 100 years ago, 1920. So this comes from the Atlantic. The white population was 95 million.
Yeah.
And the Klan had 3, 4, 5 million members.
Oh, wow.
Like almost 4 to 5 million out of 95 million of violent, racist terrorists. That's horrifying. But today, according to the Anti-Defamation League, the white population is 234 million, and the Klan's membership is numbered in the thousands. Now, there's probably more who sympathize with the Klan, and there's different splinter groups, the American Nazi Party, the Aryan Brotherhood. But white supremacists are recognized by the white community as a bunch of sick psychopaths, and they're a severely marginalized portion of the white American population. They're very small, thank God. We made a lot of progress on this issue in the last 100 years.
Right.
And that's part of the history. that needs to, tell the truth in American history, tell the full truth. And this is part of the truth. When Barack Obama, who I didn't vote for because he was a red, not because he was brown. I knew he was a Marxist. I didn't vote for him, but something like, what was it, 40% of the white population voted for Barack Obama in 2008.
Yes,
that's a data point. There's a lot of data points. But that's one, datum showing us how much white, and not only voted for him, the hoopla for Obama. You remember the hope and change hoopla? I mean, my God, I'd never seen that kind of enthusiasm for any candidate in my entire life. So I'm a lot of the.
He is a hell of a speaker, though. I got to give him that. Guy can talk.
He is. He is. He's charming and he's very intelligent, but he's a real leftist. That's why I didn't vote for him. John McCain, the late John McCain, I respected as a naval officer. He was tortured in prison.
In Vietnam,
in Vietnam. So I respect him as a naval officer, but as a politician, he was almost as leftist as Obama. So there wasn't that much of a choice for me. But there's a lot of evidence that we can bring forward showing that white racism, the white supremacists, they're a marginalized tiny portion of the white population. Joe Biden yelling that white supremacists are the worst terrorists. It's just false. It's an absurdly false. You got Islamic terrorists, jihadists. You got Antifa. You got Black Lives Matter burning down cities. In the summer of 2020, they're vastly more dangerous and widespread than white supremacists are in this country. They're still around. Those bastards are still around, Rob, but they're further down the list in terms of how prevalent they are and consequently how dangerous. One last point. Remember that riot in Charlottesville, Virginia? August 2017, the Unite the Right riot, a rally that turned to a riot. I don't know how many Nazis and Klan members were there. I never could get an exact figure. Some said a few hundred, some said maybe 1,000. This was the huge rally, drawing white supremacists from all over the country. They had maybe hundreds. Now that's hundreds too many, but out of 234 million white people in this country, that's a marginalized community, and we need to recognize that. And that's true news and it's good news. That's one issue we made a lot of progress on.
Again, for people that are just listening, why Johnny still can't read or write or understand math and what we can do about it. Andrew Bernstein here on the program. Again, if you're listening to us for the first time, please subscribe and share this interview to your friends and family. And definitely go and check out the book where your local bookstores are sold or Amazon.com.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. For people watching on video, here it is, why Johnny still can't read or write or understand math and what we could do about it. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. That's where most books are sold these days. So if that's where they could get it. It's relatively inexpensive. It's only like $16 or something like that. So anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely check out the book. And we've been talking about this a little bit, and you'll see some of that in the other interview that we'll be showing you. But let's get into the book. So I know you've wrote books on many different topics. You have a lot of different books out. Again, people should look up those other books. It's Andrew Bernstein. You can look him up on Amazon or just Google his name, and I'm sure all that.
Well, my website, Rob, is andrewbernstein.net.
andrewbernstein.net. Check that out also. So, Andrew, let's talk about this. So, schools is obviously a big thing. You have kids. It's a big thing for a lot of people that are watching that have kids. What made you want to write this book and on this topic of education in general?
Well, I have a PhD in philosophy, Rob. I've been teaching in the schools, colleges and universities in the New York area for 40 years. And I went, K through 12 to the government schools in Brooklyn. And I noticed, looking back on now, schools weren't great when I was there. But I noticed a decline in the 40 years I've been teaching. That like a lot of the kids can't read cursive anymore. They don't teach that.
Read cursive. They can't write cursive.
Yeah, they can't read or write it. So I have to print when I put stuff on the board. Very often I have to print. And the real shocker to me was when I realized that a lot of the college students struggle just to read. They struggle just with the mechanics of reading. So trying to teach philosophy where you're dealing with very sophisticated material to kids who struggle. Good kids, they're good kids, but they struggle to read, and they certainly can't write college level essays, and they don't know anything about history. So I can't use historical examples in class to illustrate the principles of philosophy, and they don't know much about literature, so I can't use fictional examples. These poor kids, their education has really been stunted. And the math people tell me the same, that they need to do a lot of remedial work with the kids to get them up to college level, material. And so I just wonder what the hell happened. I know the school was bad, but they weren't this bad. And so I started to do a lot of research on this, and I published a long essay on the topic a few years ago in the Objective Standard magazine. And then I expanded it into the book. I wanted to reach parents, to let them know just how bad the schools are and what they could do about it to enhance their child's education. Because overwhelming majority of parents love their kids. Not all, some of them are, SOBs, but most parents love their kids and they want their kids to get a good education. And so a lot of parents seem to think, I think they know better now after the pandemic, but leading up to that, they seem to think, because the parents are working hard, they got jobs and everything, they seem to think we drop the kids off at school in the morning and pick them up later in the day. In the meantime, the schools are teaching them. Well, yeah, that's how it should be, but that's not how it is. I want the parents to know, one, how bad the schools are, and two, what they could do to really improve their kids' education. That's why I wrote the book.
Would that be solved though if we just cut these class sizes down? I remember teaching, and you got 30 some odd kids in the classroom. I mean, one teacher to 35 kids, 30 kids. I mean, they're not going to pay attention. We went through this about the cell phones. If you take a lot of this silliness out of the classroom, get the cell phones out of the classrooms, make the classrooms smaller, wouldn't that help some of these public schools? I understand what you're saying about the ideology, but just taking that out of that, if you do have those small classroom sizes with, no distractions inside the room, wouldn't that help these kids learn better and pump the grades up? Maybe not extremely high, but a little bit better than they are.
Well, I mean, I think that's a small step in the right direction, but the teacher, there's some states are less irrational than others, but in a lot of states, you're so micromanaged by what's his name, Bester, Arthur Bester was an American historian, wrote a book in 1950s, Educational Wastelands, and he raised the question, who controls the school system? He called it the interlocking directive, and the interlocking directive is one, the teachers' colleges or the schools of education. Two, the state departments of education, and three, the federal Department of Education, which I don't think existed back then, but exists now. But that's the interlocking director. They control the schools, and they're against phonics and teacher reading. They're against factual knowledge. They're against academic subjects. And so you might have some school districts are better than others where teachers can actually teach those subjects, and your suggestion would help. A smaller school size.
Well, what are they for in these Department of Educations? Just to teach, socialist ideology or what?
Yeah, exactly. Not just socialist ideology. They're communists. They're outright communists. So for example, they don't teach much American history anymore. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, because 100 years ago, they got rid of history for a weird hybrid called social studies. What the hell is social studies? It's a rubber term that can mean anything to anybody, and it often does. They teach very little history. So a couple of years ago, my logic class, I got 20 students in a college logic class. And logic is an abstract subject matter. So I try to bring in examples to illustrate it for the kids. So I figured James Madison is a pretty safe example. I mentioned him. I don't remember the context anymore, but I had 20 kids in the class. 10 out of 20, all these kids are Americans, born, reared, schooled here. 10 out of 20 never heard of him. They never heard of James Madison. 10 out of 20 knew that he'd been president of the United States. 10 out of 20 never heard of him. And 0 out of 20 knew that he was the main author of the US Constitution and virtually the sole author of the Bill of Rights. So they're not, and that's not atypical. So they're not teaching, they're not teaching much history. And when they do teach American history, too often they use Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States. Now, Zinn wasn't just your typical Marxist intellectual. according to the FBI, he was a member of the Communist Party. He
Oh,
was a
wow.
member of CPUSA, and his book is a travesty of endless communist lies and smears against the United States. And this is often the book they use in the rare instances they teach American history in the first place. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, communism is morally superior to capitalism, and America is barely better than Nazi Germany. That's the political ideology that dominates you, and they want to make damn sure they ram this down the kids' throats. And so the less they know about history, the less educated people are, the more you can indoctrinate them with propaganda. And that's what goes on in the schools today.
I want to talk about the Chinese. The Chinese go to school almost all year round. They go to school like 10 or 11 hours a day, as far as that. I see these schools, whether it's in Florida, whether it's in Rhode Island, New York, every day. Well, it seems like every day, but every month it's like they have a professional day, a day off. You're out of school for 3 months. They don't do that in these countries like China. And I'm not trying to push Chinese ideology on the program here. I'm just saying, you got these kids from China, they come over here, go to college, and then they go back to their own country using our educational system as far as college, and they go and bring all their intelligence back. That's another story for another day of why we should try to see if we can keep some of these people over here if they're intelligent and can help the country. But, I just want to talk about, can you talk a little bit about that? About because they're producing all these incredible intellectual people, and it seems like maybe we should look somewhat at their educational system, because it seems in some ways maybe they're doing it right. I know they're probably preaching the Communist Manifesto.
Rob. Yeah, I would look to Maria Montessori, not to Communist China, for educational inspiration.
Okay, but you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of these. They're coming over and they're very intellectual. They're not dummies.
Let me make a few points about Chinese education. Chinese culture, good news, not the communist system, but Chinese culture emphasizes education. But and Asian culture generally, but it's often been in the hard sciences, STEM, science, technology, and math.
We need that in our country.
Yeah, we do. We do, but we need the humanities also. And China's ruled by a brutal communist dictatorship. How much humanities do you think those kids are getting to learn? Philosophy, literature, things that might teach the kids to be humane. People have rights. The government should protect their rights. And so the kids would question the communist regime. I don't think so. I don't. Even my students who come over the years, who come here from China, they're good kids. They're very bright kids. They're hardworking kids. But oh my God, do they struggle with Western philosophy? I mean, the concepts of philosophy, they're not taught that Asian culture doesn't emphasize the humanities because it's not practical in their view. And the communist regime certainly doesn't want kids, studying the humanities and then raising questions about the moral rectitude of the communist regime. I wouldn't look to a totalitarian state, although they are very good in math and science. And you're right, we need more of that. I would look to Maria Montessori, the great Italian educator, and the Montessori schools. I think Maria Montessori is definitely on the right track. She recognized that not only is training the mind rather than indoctrinating kids, but training the mind, the purpose of fundamental purpose of education. But she trained the kids to think independently, whereas the progressives made the kid, John Dewey and those guys, made the kids work in groups and do group projects. And if the kid disagreed with the group, you had to conform to the group rather than voice your own mind. Maria Montessori's classroom, the kids worked independently, and on the subjects that they were interested in. Let's say, for example, you have some girl reading a novel, and some boy who's already read it comes over and asks her if they can discuss it. It's up to the kid to say yes or no. Yes, I want to discuss it with you, or no, thank you. I want to keep reading independently. But the kids don't have to conform to the group. They don't have to work in groups. They don't have to conform. And they learn to think for themselves. And these are the kind of people who don't, just obey the wise rulers of the state. These are the people who question whether it's Trump or Biden or the Chinese dictator or Putin or whoever it is. These are the kids who think independently and will question the moral rectitude of a state that's violating rights. So I think Maria Montessori is the real inspiration here for us.
Yeah, I think more of what I was getting at was what you were speaking about with the Chinese culture. Again, like I said, I wasn't trying to stand up for their
No, I
system
know.
of education.
I know you're not a communist.
We're in the communism situation there, but I was more so, like I said, speaking about the culture. But I do agree with you. The group project, and I was not a fan of that system because you might have 2 or 3 people in there, or maybe 4. And one person or 2 people are doing all the work, and then you got 2 people sitting on their butt not doing a damn thing.
Yeah, I would have no problem
Yeah.
with kids working in groups because a lot of times in the real world you gotta work in groups. But I would encourage the kids, don't give up your own independent judgment for the group. If you disagree with the group, stand up and speak out. So when the group has to make a report, it's like it could be like SCOTUS. You got dissenting opinions. Here's the dominant view of the group, and here are the people who disagree with the group on this. But we
do you think I'm thinking about this
to think independently.
This is about education too, but we're seeing this on social media. If you're a conservative libertarian and you speak your opinion, you're not in that groupthink of the liberal ideology. Same thing with the mandates that happened. If you were against it, you were outside the ideology, you would get censored, no freedom of speech, the list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost seems like, and I'm trying to frame this the correct way, but it seems like this is really happening more and more in our culture.
Yes.
It might start with the schools and the little kids, but it's moving through college. Same thing. You have a conservative on a college campus, they get booed, heckled, spit on. They can't speak. If you put a liberal politician or person on a college campus, everything's fine. There's not really a lot of outrage. You may have a couple of protesters, you may have none. So it just seems like it starts again with the little kids, but it moves on through, college, through life in general, this kind of groupthink.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. The leftists, hardcore leftists of the Bernie Sanders ilk control the schools of education. They control the government school system. They control the humanities divisions of our universities, have for a number of years. And like we've been talking about, the goal here is to indoctrinate the kids. So I know, kids who come out of so-called good schools, Columbia University, for example, and they're so filled with Marxist propaganda. And, when I try and reason with them, I find out that, well, they don't know a lot of American history. They don't know a lot of world history. They don't know a lot of the great literature of the world. They don't know very much science. That they've been robbed of an education. They've been indoctrinated. If they went to in a physics department or in one of the hard sciences or, in the medical pre-med, or they were maybe in the business programs, it's not as bad. But in the humanities, where we're supposed to be teaching kids, to know about human beings, no literature, no history, know those subjects, and then question critically the government, the church, anybody, your professors, your family, anybody, question, raise questions, not just obey authority. They're very weak. They don't know much, but they're so filled with propaganda and with self-righteousness. They're self-righteously indoctrinated that we're woke and we realize America's racist and sexist and so on and so forth, and they can't back it up. They just can't back it up. They don't have the evidence. I'll give you one example.
Yeah,
the man-made global warming hysteria. I've been fascinated. I'm a philosopher, not a scientist, but I've been fascinated by that issue going back to 1988 when James Hansen at NASA first started pushing that theory. I've done a lot of research over the years because scientists write books, and they write books for intelligent laymen like you and me. I can't read the journal articles; that goes over my head. But I can read the popular books, and I published 2 essays on this, and I could say I can back this up with a lot of evidence. And the essays are on my website, The Truth About Climate Change and Further Truth About Climate Change. andrewbernstein.net if anybody wants to read it. I can say, backed up with a lot of evidence, the truth about climate change is this. Climate change is overwhelmingly natural, only trivially man-made, and warming is beneficial to life on Earth in contrast to the colder periods of Earth's climate history. I could back that up with a lot of evidence. When I talk to the kids who come out of good schools, out of the humanities programs, they don't know any of this. They don't know much. They don't know enough science to challenge the propaganda. They're educated in the sense that they have a college degree from an Ivy League school, but they're not educated. They're indoctrinated. They think they're educated. It's really sad. It's sad. It's very sad.
I want to end with this about schools, and then I do want to, I have one more question about the book, I should say, after that. I went to Catholic school K through 12 before college and my master's. It was a great education. And with that said, I never went to public schools, so I can't really speak for them. I've taught in some public schools. I can speak about my experiences in the teaching aspect, but not as a student. Do you believe in the competition with the charter, the private, the Catholic school, and that kind of competition with the public school, as far as a lot of legislators, politicians running right now, some are for and some are against this, putting the state fund that used to only go to the public school and mixing that with the private school, the charter school, and the Catholic school? What do you think do you think that competition will be good? Do you think states should be giving that money to those private charter Catholic schools along with the public? What do you think about that?
I think it's a small step in the right direction. I think if the money follows the student, and they go to a private school, I think that would help. But like I said, competition or nothing else is going to redeem the government school system. It's hopeless. I think parents need to pull the kids out of the schools, and they have a lot of options. They could homeschool them. They could join or form homeschool co-ops. Really good news, the micro schools I was talking about.
Who's teaching these micro schools and the co-ops, though?
Well, the micro schools means that the teachers, certified teachers from the schools, have opted out of the system because they're dissatisfied with the system, and they contract with a few families to start a small school, in somebody's basement or in the rec room of one of these families. So those are teachers. Those are former government school teachers who are teaching the micro schools. The homeschool co-ops is the parents. Like I said before. One parent might be an engineer and teach math to the kids. One parent might have a history degree, from a college.
Yeah, but then, sorry to interrupt, Andrew, but I got to push back on this. But then you got these kids that come from these impoverished areas. They're not going to be able to opt into these micro schools because they're not going to have the money to.
Well, wait, let me point something out. Here's some good news for you, Rob.
Sure.
The leading demographic in the country today who's moving away from government schools and into homeschooling are Black Americans.
Okay.
And I think Latino Americans are up there also. That's a very good sign, because everybody seems to agree that the schools in a number of urban Black neighborhoods are the worst. And they have a lot of discipline problems, for one thing. So to see a lot of Black American parents or Latino American parents pulling their kids out of the government schools and homeschooling, or joining or forming homeschool co-ops where the parents pool their resources and teach different courses to the kids, is very encouraging. But Rob, and the micro schools are taught by disgruntled teachers who've opted out of the system, which is a really good sign. And it's growing very rapidly. So one thing we haven't discussed is tutors. Because you can get tutors inexpensively today. One good thing that came out of the pandemic is the rise of the Zoom technology. So, for example, we didn't even discuss teacher training, Rob. How much time do we have? Because I want to tell a story.
Yeah. I think we got about 20 minutes, 15 minutes.
Okay,
before this thing cuts off. But go ahead.
I'll tell a story. True story. 1999, I'm contacted by Cliff's Notes. Now, Cliff's Notes, of course, develops, teaches study guides for various great works of literature, right? And when Cliff's Notes first started out, 1950s, 1960s, their main demographic was high school and college kids. I remember my high school English teachers, and then later on in college, I was an English major, the professor, don't read the Cliff's Notes. they didn't want us reading the Cliff Notes, not because Cliff Notes aren't any good, they are, but they didn't want us reading the Cliff Notes instead of the novels, which makes sense. 1999, Cliff Notes hires me to write the Cliff Notes for 3 Ayn Rand titles: Anthem, The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, which I proceed to do. The general editor tells me by 1999, 2000, their main demographic is high school English teachers who've never read the books they're assigned to teach when they went to college, or worse, don't understand them. So why is that? That's because they're taking education courses. They're not taking the future English courses. Future English teachers are taking fewer literature classes than literature majors are, because they're taking education classes. And the future math teachers are taking fewer math courses than math majors are, because they're taking education courses, and so on and so forth, science, history. So the high school teachers, never mind the elementary school teachers, the high school teachers don't know much of the subject they're teaching. Now, you look at the various graduate programs, and today with LinkedIn or your various websites like varsitytutors.com, it's not hard to find. Here, these kids in graduate school, you could be, and with the technology, you could be in Rhode Island, and you find you want to hire a math tutor for your kids. Here's a kid at the University of Oregon across the country. He's getting a PhD in math. First of all, he's got a bachelor's degree in math. He's already taken more math courses than the high school teachers have. Now he's working towards a PhD in math. He knows the subject vastly better than any high school teacher does. Furthermore, he's a grad student, so he's not working full time. He's freaking starving. You can get him at a very low wage, very inexpensively. You can tutor your kids in math, and he knows vastly more than the elementary, middle, or high school teachers do. So tutoring is, in that regard, is inexpensive. And you can find people who know the subject vastly more than the teachers do, because these guys in grad school are studying math or science or literature, whatever it is, not education. They're not taking education courses. So that's more good news for people who pull their kids out of the government school system. Or just to supplement, my kids is getting a very good math education in the school system, so I hire a math tutor. They're not teaching history. I want my kid to know something about American history. So I find a grad student at the University of Wisconsin who's getting a PhD in American history, and I'll tutor my kids in American history, and so on. The parents have a lot of options today, Rob.
Just make sure they're not a leftist.
They probably are, but if they're getting a PhD in history at the University of Wisconsin, they probably are. But you tell the kid, I want a medalist grad, so I want my kids to learn American history, not leftist propaganda. No Howard Zinn, and no leftist propaganda. Just teach them American history, And I think the young guy who's getting a PhD in history at one of these major universities knows enough American history.
Yeah. Right. So, Andrew, I know we're coming down to the end of this interview, so let's end with this. As far as the book goes, and again, we hope people do get the book, andrewbernstein.net. You can look for the book there, or if you want to go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Why Johnny Still Can't Read or Write or Understand Math, and What We Can Do About It. Andrew, as we end, can you tell people what you hope they learn from the book when they do buy it?
Yeah, 2 things. One is the shocking truth, Rob, that the powers that be, Arthur Bester's interlocking directory, the teachers' colleges, the State Department of Education, and the Federal Department of Education, who control the school system, they've dumbed it down to this point, and they've done it deliberately, which makes sense. You look at it, you say, nothing could be bleeped up this badly by accident. It has to have been done deliberately, and it was. And the first half of the book documents it, that they don't want the kids learning to read well, which is why they don't use phonics. They don't want the kids to learn real thinking skills, why they don't teach a lot of reading, writing, and arithmetic. They don't want the kids to learn academic subjects, which is why they teach far fewer academic courses than they do in most European and Asian countries. So that's the first thing, the shocking truth that the dismal state of American school system was done on purpose. And the second half of the book is all the things parents can do, to improve their children's education that we've been discussing. Homeschooling, homeschool co-ops, tutors, micro schools, or just parents after school. I know parents get home from work and they're tired. I believe me, I know, I work, I get it. But on the other hand, your child's education is really important. So maybe after dinner you take a nap, and then you work with the child, on the reading or on the mathematics, or you do it on the weekends. But parents generally love their kids and they want their kids to get a good education. When they realize how bad the schools are and that the schools cannot be reformed, and that they could do it themselves. And it's not that hard. When you deal, elementary education is the most fundamental. You lay the foundations. Not that hard for an adult. Go on Amazon, get a few books on beginners American history or beginners math, and teach the kids the basics on the weekends or on holidays or in the evening after you take a nap after work or whatever, because parents love their kids. They want their kids to get a good education. There are things, the good news is there are a lot of things parents could do. And the single most important thing, reading, that's easy. We discussed that. Motivate the child by showing the kid at a very early age that books are fun. Kids, the books the kids like, you read to the kid. And then 2, about 4 or 5 years old, use phonics, teach the kids the alphabet, how to sound out the words. In a few weeks, the child can be reading independently. Learn how to read. If you do those 2 things, Rob, it's no more difficult for the kid to learn to ride a bike. So there's a lot of things parents, a healthy child, a lot of things parents could do to improve their children's education. That's the good news.
Again, people should check out, it's andrewbernstein.net. For people that want to learn more about Andrew, definitely get the book, whether it's at Barnes and Nobles or Amazon or even at the website. Again, Andrew, thanks so much. Where can people find more about you? I know you do have a Rumble show, or you did last time we spoke.
Well, they can go on my
ahead.
website, which is andrewbernstein.net. One of my podcasts is The Hero Show through the Objective Standard Institute, which is on YouTube. The Hero Show's on YouTube. And then the show you're talking about, the political show I do, Truth in Culture and Politics, is archived on Rumble, Truth in Culture and Politics. So, but, if they really care about education, the book, Why Johnny Still Can't Read or Write or Understand Math and What We Could Do About It, that's, I think, the book that people should read. And it's, like $16 from Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. So it's not expensive. I think I've conceded enough, Rob, to think it's a bargain.
AndrewBernstein.net. Definitely check him out and check out the book. Andrew, thanks so much for your time tonight. Greatly appreciate it and hope to talk to you again soon. There's so much to talk about. This is a really important issue that America is really struggling with and has been for a while.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rob. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.